couple moves into a new house and finds a child S room that wasn't at T in the original floor plan. What's inside is even more disturbing. Sophie and Daniel had always dreamed of owning a rustic countryside home away from the city's chaos. When they stumbled upon a weathered Victorian house nestled on the edge of a sleepy town, they were captivated by its vintage charm. Despite the overgrown yard and creaking wood, they saw potential. With wide smiles and grand plans, they bought the house and began renovation. Mornings were filled with hammering, painting, and laughter echoing through the hollow halls. Each room brought a new surprise, some delightful, others unsettling. Neighbors whispered about the house's eerie past, but Sophie and Daniel dismissed it as folklore. They were in love with their dream home, and nothing would dampen their spirits, not yet. The deeper they dove into renovations, the more the house began to reveal itself in ways they never anticipated. It was as if the house had secrets hidden behind every wall, waiting to be unearthed. One rainy afternoon, while Daniel knocked down a section of an old bookshelf in the upstairs hallway, he noticed something odd. The space behind the wall was deeper than expected. Curious, he pried open the wall, revealing a narrow wooden door concealed behind drywall. Sophie rushed upstairs as Daniel called out to her, and together they stared at the strange discovery. They checked the blueprint, no mention of an extra room. It was as if the space didn't exist. With bated breath, they pushed the door, but it didn't budge. "It's like it's sealed shut," Daniel muttered. The air around the door felt heavier, colder. They exchanged nervous glances. Sophie joked it was probably just an old storage space, but her voice trembled. They didn't know it yet, but they had just uncovered something that wasn't meant to be found. The house, it seemed, was far more alive than they realized. A week later, Daniel returned from work to find the mysterious door slightly ajar. He called for Sophie, who swore she hadn't touched it. They hesitated, then slowly pushed it open. Inside was a tiny room, barely larger than a closet. The walls were painted a faded pastel blue, and tiny chairs, a crib, and a small dresser sat undisturbed as if time had frozen. On the walls were crude crayon drawings, figures of a child, a tall shadow, and scribbles that looked like words, now smudged and indecipherable. The room was thick with dust, yet nothing seemed aged or rotten. Sophie felt a chill crawl up her spine as she stepped inside. The atmosphere was suffocating, unnatural. Daniel snapped a photo, but when they looked at it later, the image was distorted, as if something had moved, something they hadn't seen. The room wasn't just hidden, it was forgotten, and it had a reason to stay that way. Every time they entered the hidden room, a crushing weight seemed to settle on their chests. Sophie felt dizzy, her stomach turning as if she were being watched. Daniel, who was usually rational, admitted to feeling inexplicably anxious inside. The air was colder than the rest of the house, the light dimmer even during the day. The room had been untouched for decades, yet it didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. Sophie found a doll in the crib with one eye missing and patches of hair torn out. When she picked it up, she swore she heard faint breathing behind her. Daniel was in the hallway. They started keeping the door closed, but it would creak open at night, even when locked. They were no longer comfortable in their own home. The renovation project was beginning to feel like a trap, one they had unknowingly walked right into. Determined to keep the room sealed, Daniel installed a new lock. He placed the key in a drawer in the kitchen, far from the room. But one morning, Sophie found the key lying on her nightstand. Confused, she returned it to the drawer. The next day, it was back, this time in her coat pocket. They searched for explanations. Maybe they moved it unknowingly. Maybe someone was playing a prank. But there were no signs of a break-in, and no one else had access to the house. The final straw came when Daniel opened his toolbox and found the key resting neatly on top of the wrenches, though he swore he hadn't put it there. That night, they heard a soft jingling sound from upstairs, the unmistakable clink of key. When they rushed up, the room's door stood wide open. The key lay just inside, gleaming in the moonlight. It was no longer asking for attention, it was demanding it. Sophie went to the local library and sifted through old newspaper archives, hoping to uncover any history about the house. That's when she found it. A single article dated 30 years ago. It spoke of a couple who had lived in the house with their 6-year-old daughter, Emily. One day, Emily vanished. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. She had simply gone missing. The case remained unsolved. and the parents eventually moved away, never speaking publicly again. The article included a photo of Emily, a cheerful little girl with wide eyes and curly hair. Sophie A.'s hands trembled as she realized the girl looked just like the one in the crayon drawing. She showed Daniel, and neither could deny the resemblance. The couple felt sick. That room wasn't just a forgotten nursery, it was Emily's room, and she had never truly left. The house hadn't just kept her memory, it had kept her soul. From that night on, the house shifted. Sophie would walk past the nursery and see the doll's head turned in a different direction. Daniel found crayon marks on the walls that hadn't been there before. New drawings of two adults surrounded by shadow. At night, whispers floated down the hallway, unintelligible but insistent. The temperature in the room plummeted. Even with the heater on full blast, they could see their breath inside. Lights flickered, doors slammed. The baby mobile above the crib spun slowly on its own. Sophie awoke one night to find tiny handprints on the fogged bathroom mirror. Daniel set up a camera in the room, but the footage always ended with static around 3:33 a.m., the same time they heard crying through the walls. They were no longer questioning whether the room was haunted. Now they were trying to survive it. The couple contacted a local paranormal investigator who had worked on unsolved hauntings. After a walk through the house, the woman said one thing that chilled them to the bone. Emily's here, but she's not alone. According to her, a malevolent force had attached itself to Emily's soul, trapping her within the room and feeding off her pain. The child's spirit was scared, not evil, but the darkness had corrupted her energy. The more the couple tried to communicate, the more unstable things became. Sophie cried when she heard Emily's voice whisper, "Help me," from a broken baby monitor. Daniel felt something shove him violently when he tried to bless the room. The entity wasn't just keeping Emily, it was using her as bait. The room wasn't haunted by a ghost, it was imprisoned by a curse, and they had brought it back to life. Armed with candles, old toys, and a recorder, Sophie and Daniel entered the room one last time. They gently called out to Emily, asking what she needed. The recorder picked up a faint, tearful voice. "Don't let him see me." Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness. The door slammed shut behind them, and the temperature dropped below freezing. The doll flew across the room. Crayon drawings began appearing on the walls in real time, figures with hollow eyes and bleeding mouths. Sophie screamed as invisible hands clawed at her. Daniel tried to open the door but was thrown back. A shadow emerged from the corner, tall and faceless, pulsing with hatred. The couple realized the spirit was no longer just Emily. The force had consumed her, twisted her. The house was a trap, and they had fallen into its final lair. The only way out now was to break the curse, if they could survive long enough. They remembered a note the investigator left behind, a ritual of release meant to sever bonds between a soul and a dark entity. With trembling hands, they gathered what they needed: Emily's old toy, a photo of her, and the original blueprints of the house. They lit candles and stood at the center of the room, chanting the word. The walls trembled, the drawings melted, screams echoed around them. A shadow lunged from the crib, trying to stop them. Sophie held the doll tightly and shouted Emily's name. The air split with a shriek as light exploded from the ceiling. The dark presence wailed, twisting in agony as it was dragged into the floor, leaving behind silence. Emily's ghost appeared for a moment, smiling softly, mouthing "thank you" before vanishing in a beam of golden light. The room crumbled inward, sealing itself behind them. They stumbled out, breathless. The nightmare was over. The child was free. If this story chilled your spine and kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more terrifying tales every week. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you found a hidden room in your house? And remember, sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. See you in the next nightmare.